Welcome to Sentiment Sessions, the podcast. My name is Tyler. I'm your host today. And today we're going to be welcoming back someone who we had on the show, all things love, all things relationships, and everything sexy. We got Miss Dr. Joy in the house again. Welcome back, Dr. Joy. I'm so glad that you are joining us for a second round.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited. We're going to go deeper.
Yes, we are.
And I like going deep, so let's get it started.
I love it. I just want to say I love your energy. It truly has resonated with the audience. I have had so much feedback from the last time you were on the show. And so I said, we got to bring you back. We already knew we were going to bring you back, but I knew once I started hearing the responses, I said, oh, she got to come back sooner than later. Let me get you back on the sofa. So welcome back today. And I want to just pick up from the last time you were here. I know we talked about, relationships and how everybody responds differently. Give us a little bit of kind of the recap on your end in terms of where we left out. I think it was like communication, the mapping, if you will. And
yes.
We'll go a little bit from there. What are some of the next things? Maybe give the audience a little bit of just a highlight of where we were before, and then go into the next steps of relationships, if you will.
So we kind of tapped into, I like to put things in 3 different categories. The first one is creating and being able to understand a lot more of why you have the desires, the wants that you have. And then the second one being able to communicate that. And communication, nonverbal, verbal, and oftentimes when we're talking about what and why and digging deeper, it also gets into being able to connect that with other people.
Yeah.
So as an intimacy coach, people oftentimes forget that intimacy, or the word intimate, just means connection.
Exactly.
And so it's how you connect spiritually, emotionally, physically, intellectually, and you understanding that, so then you're able to articulate it. But then the third part is experiencing that. And part of that experience is also transitioning from who you were or who people thought you were to who you want to be or who you actually are.
Come on. Yeah, that's important to note too, because a lot of times we have what we consider our ideal self, but then here's the reality of the situation. And there's a huge gap that could be in between. Like, wait a minute, I thought I was this way, at least in my mind. But now that I'm actually on this journey, if you will, or connecting, it's playing out totally different than what I was projecting to myself, right? So do you see a lot of that disconnect between, and I know you do a lot of therapy. I know, with couples, like helping as a relationship expert. So what are you seeing as some of the, I guess, that difference between where people think they are versus where they want to be?
So I would say I don't practice therapy intentionally. I coach people.
That's true.
And there's also a difference in who's coachable and who needs a therapist. So I refer people if I'm like, no, this is a point where you need a therapist. Because part of, even in general, when we talk about, like, when people are going to a therapist, they're presenting a particular situation, and the therapist has a particular model that they are using to help them achieve a particular goal. In coaching, just like with any sport, or when anyone is going to have like an actual coach do something to help them achieve a goal, it is intentional for what they are trying to do.
Gotcha. That's
so
a big,
when
that's
I
a
used to
major
be
point to make. Yeah.
when I used to be a sex offender counselor, people were mandated to come to me to get past some of their deviant behavior so that they can be reintroduced to society with the tools that's necessary for them not to go back to their illegal activities.
So give us an example. You can't just put down a blanket statement without telling the audience, like, what are some of the things that we
So
say
like as a
deviant
sex
behavior?
offender counselor, I mean,
Oh.
well, when you are
Okay, you're talking about like people who have committed like rapes or
yes,
something. Okay.
rape,
All right.
molestation, peeping toms.
Okay.
Even to one of my clients was actually a suspended police officer that said that he was researching child pornography on his work computer.
Oh.
But you can't do that
don't know how you
if
do
you're
that.
not in the sex crimes unit.
Oh, wow. So unrelated to his specific job function. Oh, wow.
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, I even had someone that was high-ranking military official that was actually molesting a grandchild.
Oh.
And because his daughter actually found out that this same type of grooming behavior was going on that she experienced, they made him come to therapy. And so it's not like 90% of the clients were court ordered. I had a female who was a foster parent that molested young males.
Oh, wow.
So it's not what some people always think, where, you know, it's always males that are doing these sex crimes. Majority, yes. But
There are some
all of
females
those,
that have.
yeah. And so sex trafficking, prostitute or pimps that, you know, have prostitutes, and like a lot of those different things are considered deviant behaviors because they're against the grain of what is allowable or
Right, what is
legal
considered normal.
in the U.S.
Yeah. Exactly.
Where you heard me say legal in the U.S. So
So
that's
there's a
why
distinction because in other countries it may not be considered.
right. And so that is like being court ordered and having to come and, like, you know, because you can't use public restrooms while you're traveling, you're having to go to the weigh station for the trucks and use those restrooms because you need to stay away from your triggers, which public places. So there are things like that that I'm like, even with the everyday couple, or actually I have a lot of individuals, male or female, that will seek coaching because they have a desire to move away from where they currently are. And because I focus on pleasure, then it's being able to enhance or being able to explore more pleasurable experiences.
Gotcha.
When someone is talking to me and I'm like, there's something deeper here, that's a mental health portion, then you need to go here. Now, sometimes I get, you know, the creepy old nasty people.
But do you see a lot of that though, where, I mean, what a percentage of people, if you just had to throw out that, okay, something deeper here, I need to refer you out, is it
No,
I don't quite common or just very rare?
Yeah, I don't see a lot because I don't present myself as the mental health therapist.
Gotcha.
I have some individuals that I will tell them, like, what they are trying to pursue is something that seeing a mental health therapist first is something that they will possibly need to work out. And once we get through our sessions, and I don't do long drawn out therapy, like my things are usually 2, maybe 3 times that we need to meet, because I do a lot more based off of when you have something that you say you want to do. Now we're going to give you some different tools, tricks, techniques, tips
so what
in
you're
order to
saying
get it,
is
and
that
you got to do it.
Exactly. So what you're saying is people typically come with you with a goal already in mind. Or they're looking
have an
to,
idea.
Okay.
They have
and
an
then you
idea
help
of
them
something.
define what that is to be able to achieve it, and that's done over the course of a few.
Absolutely, because you have to apply it. There are things that you have to try, things that you have to do that are physical things when it comes to pleasure, versus when you're talking about mental health, that can be a longer thing because you got to really unpack how your brain got to that place.
Exactly.
So there's like simple things with emotional, with intellectual, where I can throw the intellectual person some statistics and they're like, oh, okay, I'm with it.
Gotcha.
So,
Yeah.
it's a little different when you're talking about couples, because now you're talking about two individuals that oftentimes are presenting because there's something that they want, which again, we want to do more of this, or I'm trying to understand how I can get more.
So tell me this. So they've identified that there is a gap. And usually that's associated with some type of disconnect between the two of them. And they're seeking you out to help bridge that gap to get a unified or understanding of how they want to approach with either meeting the needs. Are they coming in with saying, I'm open to trying to figure out how to have a balance, or I get to where this person needs me and I just can't do it?
One or the other. You see me kind of move, because I'm thinking about like all these different couples and things, because one person might be like, I want this person to do an act, or here's a more specific one. I want my husband to allow me to have a threesome, and any other man would be willing to have a threesome, because that's how they're coming in. And then I start telling them, actually, no.
Well, let me back
The
up for a second.
threesomes, the
This
fantasies.
is a female wanting a threesome with two men or another woman?
It doesn't even matter.
I'm guessing no.
Well, it matters.
I mean, I'm facetious, but
yeah,
but
it does.
yeah.
But to my point that I'm talking
I
about,
know,
as
I
far
get it.
as the male having an image of his wife with another man or
Yeah.
another woman, for most of these men, it's, I don't want to share you.
Exactly.
And then that can also often be reversed as well.
And I never get that, because it's almost like it's acceptable that a woman can do, has to accept that a man might want to do a threesome with two women. But for some reason, you don't see that with men. Why do you see that the case? Is that's the case? Because it's like men have this insecurity about seeing their women with, or territorial. What is it?
So if you're talking about in general, a man that has identified, this is my wife, I'm not interested in sharing you. So some of it, you can kind of say territorial, but it's like the predator, this is my prey, this is mine. So there's some possession that's in there.
Yeah.
But then there's also some insecurities that's like, why do you need more than just me? And that flips the opposite as well, with women that are also not understanding, why does he want to have a threesome? Why does he want somebody else? Am I not good enough? So it works both ways.
Exactly.
But getting to that point is like, I'm going to only take you to a certain level where then you all can agree that now we're going to find ways to try it. And then that's where I start bridging that gap with, okay, so here are some different things that you can do to try it, or here are some different things that you can try first to see if, how do you feel about role playing? How do you
Gotcha.
feel about then going to meet somebody else or have a discussion with a couple that already practices this? And so there are different things to kind of bridge from A to Z of actually doing the act that oftentimes people aren't able to figure out. Oh, okay, so yeah, so we can try that. Okay, then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about this. And it's similar to what would happen like in therapy, except for it's with a coach that's
gotcha.
like, you know what? We're not trying to unpack childhood trauma and everything. We're trying to move forward towards something else where we can win versus.
But I would imagine for some people who may have childhood traumas, that around sex related to that could impact the ability to get
Absolutely.
them there. So is that like
That's
a
when I refer them out.
That's where you
So there's the referring out for for those kind of triggering or trauma related that will be blocks to moving forward. And then there's also the other side that I refer out to, where there are individuals that are like, there's something called semantic sexuality, where there are people that will come into your bedroom that will help you learn how to masturbate. And so my girl down in Atlanta, I refer them right to her, because that's not the type
move
that
this
I
way,
do.
move that way, do this, touch her hair, touch them.
But there are people individually, like,
Get instruction.
because they've never had an orgasm, they don't understand where the clitoris is. I actually got into this whole thing because as a sex offender counselor, we had group therapy. And I couldn't believe that I'm sitting here with 7 individuals that don't understand anatomy. They don't understand that the urethra is different than the vagina.
Oh, wow.
But you're playing with all of these different areas and, you know, doing all these different things. But then it made me think about how many of my friends, how many of the everyday person doesn't understand biology, human development. And then we moved into psychology, and then we moved into like understanding through the ages, through the years, how things change. And all of that still impacts like how we have relationships.
It really does. And to your point about understanding the biology, sometimes it's the woman, the female herself, that doesn't understand it.
Herself,
I can't tell you, you know me, I always got to tell a story from sentiment sessions. I promise you, 1 week, I had 4 women in 1 week come in and do a hydrochloric therapy and insert it in the wrong hole.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And didn't know.
Wow.
And I don't really, and I had one that specifically said, I don't, you know, I didn't know.
Never looked down there.
I never looked down there. And I thought to myself, that's a thing.
Yeah.
That's a thing. And it goes to, well, what did we miss, you know, in terms of that whole education, sexual education and all of that? Like, is that something that we need to be starting with doing more of, and maybe at a younger
You look in the mirror for everything else. You need to look at the mirror, the places that you need to position the mirror.
Exactly.
In order to see.
In order to just do that self-discovery.
Absolutely.
That could be a nice, pleasurable awakening too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's a book, an author that I know very well, that she emphasizes, and she's like written some poems and different things about like putting a mirror and looking at your vagina, talking to your vagina. Men have so much more levels of comfort when it comes to touching themselves, exploring themselves, figuring things out. But there's, for whatever reason, a stigma that women don't do, as you talked about, like that self-discovery and understanding not just what it looks like, so that when it doesn't look like how it used to look, then you can have an understanding of what's going on, whether this is normal or abnormal.
Exactly.
And there's power behind being able to feel comfortable about your entire body, because as we talked about, knowing yourself, creating that in the beginning, then you can communicate to someone else or feel comfortable with, you partner, look at my vagina as well.
Exactly.
So you understand what's going on. Quick story, I used to go to the strip clubs with my male friends out. And they used to hate it because I would say, oh, her labia is dark, she's had a baby.
Oh, wait a minute.
Because when you have vaginal births, your vagina, the labia, actually change a different color because you've had some additional action there than not having a vaginal birth.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So as a relationship sexy, everything sexy expert, you have to look at vaginas to understand what's going on.
I don't. But
I'm just trying to figure like what's going into this.
but that's a part of researching
Gotcha.
and understanding. So
Okay.
then I can help other people also, like us having this conversation, understand that there's research out there about different things
I
of
see.
a vagina
This is amazing.
and clitoral stimulation. I didn't have to just look at pornography and make assumptions. I went to school and I learned from
it.
professionals.
Exactly.
So then I can also share those facts.
Exactly.
Because that's the
very
piece.
interesting. I like that. Now, do you see women come in without a mate that, just to understand how they can reach their sexual, is like the peak sexuality? So go a little bit into what you see there.
So those are usually individuals that are trying to enhance or explore if they've never had an orgasm, or I get those that don't want to be vanilla, they don't want to be boring, and they want to try some newer different things. So this might also be, we talked about previously that I was with Bedroom Candy. I was one of Bedroom Candy's top performers. So being able to educate individuals about toys, and then like there was a toy that went viral. I'm gonna call it a flower because I ain't trying to endorse nothing.
Right.
Especially something that was very popular, but people didn't talk about all of the additional things, like the fact that it wasn't really good quality. It used cancer-causing agents as a material, so there was never a way of getting it clean. The gynecologists were having to tell people stop using it because of that sucking action that it was doing wasn't healthy. There's like so many different things that come with you getting a toy and you're not understanding how to use it. I also would deal with people that would get like a bullet and put it inside the vagina. Bullets stay outside the vagina. So this is how you end up on sex and ER, because you don't know how to properly use some things, and there are so many different ways of discovering more, but there's education that we don't have around it. So I also get like the other extreme that's like, I'm having orgasms all the time, and I want to get to that intellectual area that you talk about where you're able to participate in BDSM, in the kink life.
Okay, before you go to BDSM, you had me. I'm still stuck back there at the sucking is not good. Now, why are the gynecologists saying that the sucking action is not good?
Because when you think about the nerve endings that are in the clitoris, and this is where it's supposed to go. So there are 8,000 to 9,000 nerve endings that go throughout your body just in the clitoris. And if you're constantly doing something to that is, we'll call it trauma, it's the difference between your lips that are used for biting, chewing, talking, and you have a thicker level of skin that's around it so that you can burn your lips, so that you can bite them. The clitoris isn't like that. The clitoris is there for stimulation, but if you are doing something hard to it all the time, then you start damaging some of those nerves.
Oh, gotcha. That makes a lot of sense.
And then it gets to like not having other sensitivities. Now here's the contrary. Whenever I talk about this, and I don't like to go into too much detail about it, but when people get piercings, they don't understand scar tissue and how in the very beginning it may be heightened sensitivity, but over time that scar tissue may end up decreasing sensitivity.
Gotcha.
So there's so many different things of like understanding the body,
It
and when
really
you're
is
making
a
different
lot.
decisions. Same thing,
Yeah.
piercing the nipples. It's different than piercing the ears.
Absolutely.
So there's
different
more
levels of
information.
sensitivity as well. Yeah.
And so there's more information that comes with like being able to achieve certain levels of pleasure, and also being able to understand where you are and how the different strategies, tools, tips, techniques that can help you get to where you want to be. So single women, absolutely, because I also encourage single women to understand where they are so then they can help their partner understand. Because when you get to a certain age, you don't want anybody experimenting on you.
That's right.
So,
That's right.
so there's a certain amount of, here's what I know. Now, we can have fun by exploring, but exploring is different than experimenting.
And talk about the difference between an exploration versus experimentation.
So exploring is we have agreed that we're going to go further and try something new or different. Experimenting is, I don't know how this is going to work. So like exploring, we gonna laugh at it, be like, okay, yeah, nah, that ain't the thing. Like, you know, we gonna tried it, we gonna put that over here. And like, you know, we gonna say like, okay, yeah, no, that ain't what we wanna do. Experimenting, you are like, I don't know what's gonna happen, and I am like expecting something. I got a hypothesis here.
Gotcha.
But
looking at the outcome and
Right.
expecting that outcome.
Right.
Not sure if it's going to work, but
it's not proven.
Exactly.
Where
Right.
when you're exploring, I'm talking about things where it's like, okay, this is proven to enhance, but it may not be what you are looking for enhancing yours. So we just gonna have fun. We just gonna go out here, we gonna look around, we gonna play around, we gonna do these
Well,
different
that makes
things.
sense. That makes sense. Now, take us to this whole BDSM and break down BDSM.
Okay. So BDSM is kink life.
Okay.
And kink life is the opposite of that is what we consider vanilla or original, normal, ordinary. Kink life is dealing with power, trust, control, and authority, and it enhances intellectual stimulation because someone is moving away from just having physical orgasms or physical pleasure. They're stimulated mentally. This is where some people get into breath work because when you deprive someone of their breath, it could be choking. That
Okay.
type of asphyxiation that someone is trained to do to get you out of your head. There also are limits that are leading up to that being an experience that you have agreed upon. And so there's the consent, there's the communication, and then there's the safe word. That's what we call the CCS.
So is this happening while the sex act is being performed, or this is outside of the sex act?
This is usually outside of intercourse.
So basically, this is like a different form of meditation.
It can be a different form of meditation for
Because
some.
meditation is designed to get you out of your head into your body, but this is actually choking.
It could be that, it could be spanking.
Okay.
It could be so many others. So the whole thing with kink life, it could even be something as simple as role playing.
Okay.
The difference with role playing in kink life and in vanilla is that there is intentionality there to push boundaries because someone has said as a submissive, I'm going to give up power. I'm going to give up trust. I'm going to give you the authority to be over me. And someone else has said, I accept that.
Wow.
So a lot of people think that the dominant person is the authoritarian. That's not the case because the power is actually with the submissive person because they say the safe word and the scene is done. So there's trust that's involved, but for the person that is giving that up intellectually, they are, as you said, they're getting out of their head. But then there is the dominant person that is getting out of their normal, just thinking about themselves, to also have to do a dual thought process, do more work to also be in the mind of the submissive person too.
Well, I'm
And there's pleasure on both ends.
and so you say pleasure on both ends.
Absolutely.
What does that look like for the individual when you say pleasure? Like,
So there's pleasure in giving it up because now when I am controlling, if I put this on a scale of 1 to 10 and I say 5, 5 is when I am controlling doing physical intercourse and I have an orgasm, maybe I get to a 6 if I get out of my head and it becomes a very physical releasing activity. But if I get into that intellectual, and it's not just now I no longer am having these type of reactions that I'm paying attention to in my body, and my head is no longer thinking about it as well, and I don't have to even think about it. For a submissive, oftentimes they're also like, and the dominant person is being pleased. So my body is a canvas. My body is, because we're talking about different things, like I said, spanking, but you can also tie someone up. That's the bondage part of it. And so having like your body being a canvas for somebody to create designs, because they're tying up rope in different forms of art using different type of knots. There's so many other different body paint. There's so much creativity
Dr. Joy,
that goes
I'm
into.
looking at your face telling this
I'm
story.
not telling it.
And I think you telling on yourself. I'm loving it because I was like, wait a minute, she having a flashback.
You know, so I am a trained dominatrix.
Yes,
So I
yes.
am visualizing some of these things
Wow.
as I'm talking to you about them, because there is a difference in doing these things in vanilla where it is not intentional about being able to go to push beyond just the physical.
Gotcha.
And so the pleasure on the dominant side is I get to be in control. I get to have this additional responsibility that this person has willingly provided to me to push them to other levels where they're going to be able to experience things that they can't do just physically.
Right. So women actually come to you seeking out this position of
Everybody want to
domination.
know, girl. Everybody want to. Do you train others? I do not train, but what I do is help people understand it. So like I've taken groups to a dungeon.
Gotcha.
So then they can see it, girl. One of the things that was so hilarious, I took a group in Atlanta and they talk about this. So it's they had never seen someone suspended in the air. Girl, they said this woman looked like rotisserie chicken. They would never look at chicken spinning because she had, the suspension throughout her body.
Is it uncomfortable? I mean, is she upside down? Is she right side up? What is?
I mean, she can be in any position that the
okay.
dom and that she agrees to, because everyone has their boundaries.
Gotcha.
So oftentimes when you're in a dungeon, these are not people that have met each other before. Sometimes they're coming as a couple so that they can play in public, but oftentimes it's people that you have seen and you just trust that they're going to follow the boundaries. Now, a really good dungeon has dungeon monitors.
Okay.
So if someone, is looking like they're fainting and the blood isn't coming back because it's not in an organized area, then that's fine. But people faint in vanilla life as well. You hang your head over the side of the bed and you want all that blood going to your head. You just have to be in a safe environment when you're doing it. So she could be upside down, she can be, any type of position, and he can be that same way as well. There are men that actually just use their penis, and there are men that want their penis stumped and their testicles stumped. So there's blood play, there's water play, there's shower rooms, because people like to do like medical things as well when you're in a high quality safe dungeon.
Gotcha.
Dungeons are just full of devices for people to be able to play out their scenes. When people are role playing in vanilla life, it's not as intentional about pushing past the physical, which is the reason why you'll see more of it result in intercourse, because kind of in vanilla life it is all about let's get to the physical. And intercourse doesn't always mean it's going to end in an orgasm or end in an orgasm for both. But there's a level of pleasure when you're talking about in a dominant submissive relationship, because the dom is in that role taking that on.
Gotcha.
And the submissive person is giving that up and allowing that.
Wow, that is just an interesting concept there. So I'm assuming that men come for something different. Do you have men that come in?
It will be the same thing.
The same thing?
So not usually to learn how to orgasm, but they will sometimes come in to learn how to help a female have an orgasm, or they are looking for other ways of being more intimate.
Gotcha.
So, not a client of mine yet, but I was on a call that the gentleman mentioned that his level of understanding for intimacy was just on what he considered a what word did he use? What is it when you superficial? On a superficial level, because he's like, intimacy for me is just sex, because women are more emotional than men. And I said, not exactly.
Exactly.
Because you're choosing to only express certain emotions, but if you're in the right situation and you understand your emotions when it comes to communication, then you can use some other words like I'm frustrated, I'm disgusted, or I'm elated, or I'm excited. You can start incorporating that into your vocabulary, and in using that language, then now you give different levels of describing your pleasure.
Wow, this is so interesting. But you brought up a point. You said that there are times where, in these situations where people may not reach an ejaculation or orgasm, if you will. So there's this intellectual, this plane that people, so it kind of puts me in the mind of where we are in the the dawn of AI, and people are seeking alternative type of situations where they don't even need a partner per se, because AI has replaced that intellectual and given them a sense of, are you seeing,
So some of that is AI has replaced some of the unpredictable human aspects.
so
But
talk about when you say
there's-
the unpredictable human, break that down for me.
So when you're with a human, you really don't know what they're going to do. That's part of the reason
Okay.
why some people don't want to be with humans. Because
You
you
can
want
say that again.
you want them to do something that they just will not do. It is just
Exactly.
not in their tool box to be able to even pull it out. And that's, good, bad, and different. That's coping mechanisms, but that's also their sexual pleasure tools. That's
Exactly.
for some people, it's like, I don't want someone that has a whole bunch of tools, because then I'm assuming they got a whole bunch of experiences, and I don't want nobody with a high body count.
Exactly.
But I want them to know how to
Exactly.
do certain things. And it's
Yeah.
like, how do you not know? Well, we don't have a school for this. So there's the replacing only in the aspect of achieving that physical and how you want that physical to be achieved. But I believe we talked about this last episode. Your biggest sex organ is your brain.
Yes, we did.
So having that type of connection, getting back to your other question about like certain things that men have, men also come to me because they don't understand the difference between erectile dysfunction and erectile dissatisfaction. And so using things like pornography would be one of those first type of things of seeing what we have now in AI, because there's fantasy, there's removal of that human factor that happened with pornography. Now we can even go back before that became popular and readily available with OnlyFans and everything else, to just having magazines. So being able intellectually to decipher the difference between this is a human, this is a toy, or this is a robot, becomes what the individual has to do. And why then do you want that? And if there are certain triggers that is like, I don't want human interaction because it's unpredictable, then do you ever want to embrace that lack of predictability with someone? Because now you get into being able to play, being able to be creative, being able to have someone else to experience different things with when you are trying to enhance or explore the spiritual, the emotional, and then again that intellectual and that physical.
these advancement in AI is getting kind of where, everybody getting ready for these bots that they can play with.
Yeah, it has definitely infiltrated the dating world.
Yes.
And I mean, technology is all within, like, again, the toy industry. It's also in being able to create your own avatar and talk to it and tell it what to do and how you want to respond.
You're seeing it where it's like the people are leaning on ChatGPT now for intimacy and therapy and intellectual conversations. It's almost like it's replacing, the human dynamic that actually plays out in relationships.
If you don't put a limit to it. So it's similar to like 5 years ago, pre-pandemic, when we were talking about how much time people spent on social media. And then they started having ways for you to control for yourself how much time you spend on social media. I know people that, their social media accounts have a little timer on it and, cuts it off, similar to Netflix. Or are you still watching?
That's assuming that people understand that they shouldn't be doing it. Right.
Or what is
acceptable,
for them.
Right. And you have some people who are consumed, right? Leading external validation, moving that from the human aspect to now this AI, right?
Yeah.
That's going to help. It's almost like it's replaced that piece and that need for actually control in essence.
And it can. And if you have an addiction to something,
that's another
then
thing.
when you and the definition of an addiction is it interrupts your normal social, occupational, physical, your normal life. You are now addicted to it.
Exactly.
So if someone has an addiction to AI, until they are in the realm of I want to get help, they're going to stay addicted to it. Same way like anything else.
Same addiction with anything else. Exactly. I was actually scrolling through social media about a week or two ago, and I saw a TikTok of a woman getting married to a ChatGPT robot. And she was like, I'm marrying my best friend. I was like, this is crazy. But it just started me, I started thinking about, of course, when you engage with a feed, that just a lot of other feeds come up and you start seeing all this stuff going on around people and they're having a level of intimacy with
Okay, so we
AI.
know with social media, though, some of that is just for the likes or for the hearts or whatever.
Well, that's true, too.
But what we don't want to forget is, and I can't remember, I'm going to say 10 years ago, when people like Dennis Rodman was out there marrying himself. So, there are things that people do and
just for shock value.
Well, it's shock value, but it's also an indication of who they are and how they see life. And there's still people that are like, I want a wedding, but I don't want to get married to somebody, so I'm going to put on a wedding for myself.
Yeah.
You just tapping into what this person truly believes and how they are. And that's the same way for those individuals that will get caught up in using AI and addiction, using it in an excessive way. You can consider it studying. You can consider it so many other ways of trying to what may be a innocent thought in the beginning that takes you down a rabbit hole or snowballs into something else. But there is, again, that ultimate thing of when it disrupts normal life, when you no longer can have awkward social interactions. So if initially you were having awkward social interactions, which is the reason why you started trying to figure out how you can have good interactions, safe interactions, be able to get something out of socializing. And then you went through this whole rabbit hole where now you're antisocial because the only friend you ever want is your whatever, robot or whatever you came up with. Then now you have moved away from your initial intent, and no one else is going to fix it but you. Your computer, that chat is not going to come back and say,
I get that,
get rid
but
of me.
you're seeing a lot of people who are just saying, hey, these relationships no matter how hard we try, it's not working. You know what I'm saying?
That's somebody that's giving up.
Maybe you too kinky. Maybe, you want to be kinky with me and everybody else. You got just different scenarios playing out. So you having people that are like, the divorce rate is high.
Mm-hmm.
You have, people aren't having babies as much as they used to. It's all these different things happening. We living in the age of narcissists and, soul ties and trauma bonds, and people are trying to get away from all of that. You see people going into isolation and just being okay with just being alone. So, I'm sure you're seeing the whole gamut of things, but I'm just trying to figure out, where do we see this AI potentially going and how it's showing up in your space in terms of coaching? And do you see more of that? Do you anticipate an uptick of devices that will be more AI integrated with human sexuality?
So I definitely, not necessarily AI at this point, see more devices that will help increase relationships. Getting to kind of the first question, though, that you talked about, there are individuals that if they go into loneliness, if they go into depression, then that gets into mental health. So I don't necessarily work with those particular individuals, because I'm with people that want more, they want to enhance, they want to explore. There's something additional, not wanting to suppress or eliminate or get rid of something.
That makes sense. So with AI enhancing, what are you seeing? Like, what are those type of devices that?
So one of them, which is, and not necessarily AI, but just utilizing technology that I talk about. During the pandemic, I had a couple who one person lived in Buffalo, the other person was in Canada. And so because the border was closed, they still wanted to have intimate connections. So with the use of Bluetooth activated panties that have an insert in them, they were also able to chat and feel a part of each other by having this type of what we would consider back in the day phone sex that turned into video sex, that turned into now being able to actually have a Bluetooth activated device. I'll tell a personal story as well. I think I mentioned before, I lived in Dubai for 2 years where public display of affection was illegal.
Exactly.
But I had remote, this time it wasn't the Bluetooth, it was the remote control panties. And I can visually recall he's going down the escalator looking at me, and he controlling the remote control, what's going on inside. And I got my nice little abaya on, and nobody knows what's going on while I'm standing there, and I'm kind of having a good time, just the eye contact. That's foreplay.
Wow.
But in other situations, that's, also being able to, when you can't see each other, when you're 8,000 miles away, and as long as you got Wi-Fi, then you're also able to increase your connection.
That makes sense.
So there are, again, so many other ways that technology is also helping. We mentioned earlier about how unhealthy that sucking action is, but there's new technology out there that has air puffing. So it's almost like back in the day, that
air
box
puffing.
fan, where the box fan was in the window and you would you would talk to it. And but you put a piece of paper on the backside and it was stuck on. So that's the same thing with, it's pushing air, but it's also feeling like it's sucking at the same time.
Oh.
And it's made for, it's made for being able to simulate what the mouth does. Oh. Because there's also being able to have like a licking action, like a tongue action as well.
Wow. What's the name of this?
They all on my site. So there's an entire brand. So there's
the website address.
So there's an entire brand that uses this air puffing technology, but it just is, even as far as the licking, like all of those different things are things that, again, technology wise, these devices are available, and then you can use them with other forms of technology at the same time to create your space or create your scene. Even something as simple as having a playlist and creating music, or being able to measure your breath work for when you do achieve an orgasm and your heart rate. So there's different ways of being able to integrate technology for what you are interested in. And then, as we talked about with AI, being able to recreate that. But recreating that without a human becomes a decision that someone has to make, because there's certain elements that a human brings that AI can't.
That's
Good,
true.
bad, and different.
And then there's
I
certain
love
elements
some
that
hair.
AI can bring that we don't want to deal with humans.
True. And that's the kind of also being able to have both.
Exactly.
And appreciate both
exactly.
for what they do, but also being aware of what they can do that's not good as well.
Exactly.
And having those coping mechanisms for what you want to try to fix and tolerate on both sides.
This is amazing information. Great insights. I love it. So where would we go from here? We got the communication. We got the different types of activities that are going on. What else? What else do we see?
So that's what I call the transition plan. So I talked
Okay.
about, like, you create your manual, you figure out what you want, what you like, and that could be from mild to wild, from vanilla to kink. And then you have your communication of verbal, nonverbal, understanding feelings, emotions, understanding behaviors, what things look like, how to articulate certain things that you want to see. And then you move into the transition plan. That's how you experience it. And so there's an understanding that change takes time and change is uncomfortable. So you have to give yourself some grace, but grace isn't the same thing as an excuse.
Okay.
So in giving yourself grace, or if it is a couple, there's a part of scheduling some things and then journaling, or having a way of reflecting and giving yourself time to do that.
Gotcha. Awesome.
That's a step that in general people don't do when they're just going with their norm of, we gonna have sex, we gonna go to sleep, we gonna wake up, and we gonna go through our day. Or I'm gonna have an orgasm and then I'm gonna go to sleep, and then tomorrow I'm just gonna go through my day. And that transition plan is a key element of giving yourself permission
Exactly.
to enhance or explore how to be in more pleasurable situations more often.
Okay.
Because you deserve pleasure.
Exactly. Exactly. So do you see that when they implement the transition plan, that reinforces the new and more often?
Don't nobody go back to doing basic stuff. Like, go back and do something
You said,
basic.
once you cross the line,
Right.
you there. You can't go back.
Yes.
I'm over here now.
Yes, I will
So-
actually tell a personal story. So I, in studying to be a dominatrix, did not want that to be a part of my traditional vanilla male, female, heterosexual relationship. But there was a moment where it switched for me and I could not. And I went into, so one of the things when you're in a dominant role is you speak in commands. And I got time for all these words. It's sit, move, like,
wow.
and I went into that and didn't realize it. But then it was also because I'm conditioned from being in exactly what I talked about, that reflection mode of talking about things afterwards. And I was like, how was that? Like, I didn't do that intentionally. I honestly thought that I was past that, but there was a point that was a trigger. And to give you the full story, it was someone I was dating, but it was like no penetration. And he was very close to penetrating me. And I was like, no. And so it was like, pushed him back off of me and was like, stay.
At that
That's
point.
not, but that's not a
Right.
typical, like, unless you have switched into
Right.
a dominant role, it's like, oh, get off me, I don't want this. Like,
Yeah.
usually there are more words when you're saying, I was like, stay. And like,
Wow.
he saw that switch in me, was like, okay, damn, I better stay.
Right.
But
Sometimes
then
that's
even-
what it takes, right?
But then even after that, it was, you know how you want somebody to taste something and it's a straw that you put your finger on the top of and you just get him a little. So I gave him water like he was a dog and having him taste it. But that was unintentional, but it sparked a conversation for us to also talk about, like, okay, this is what happens in being in a scene. You were playing a role that I put you in. We didn't have the communication about it. So there was some apology in there because I was holding myself accountable with, you weren't expecting this. But then what came out of it, he was like, oh no, I like it. I want
Surprised you,
more of
didn't
it.
it?
Right.
I love it.
So then for me, I was like, okay, let me take you to a dungeon so then you can really see what more of this is like and what it's about.
Gotcha.
And then we can continue to have more conversations about, is this something that we can keep in our relationship and build and grow from it? And so now I don't dismiss it because I'm like, I'm not capable of not being able to jump into this
Wow.
role.
It sounds like when you go into these roles, it could pull you in.
It's out of body.
Yeah, it's
That's
out
the
of
whole
body.
part. It's
Wow,
out of body.
This is a whole nother world.
Yes, ma'am.
and Dr. Joy, when you come on the show, you see it's so many more questions I have, but unfortunately we out of time again.
We gotta do this workshop.
Yes, we got this workshop. So
Yes.
we have a workshop that we're planning. It's going to be coming up here real soon. We're going to be putting that out, the information out. So look for that to come out real soon. I'll be sharing that in the details of this podcast and the description rather. But Dr. Joy, in the meantime and in between time, how can people contact you again? What is some, because I'm sure after people watch this, you're going to probably get a lot of calls before the workshop. So how can people contact you?
So the best way is actually Instagram, and I'm Everything's Sexy, EveryThingsSexy, 2 S's in the middle, super sexy, and really see like examples of different things, like where I stand on certain issues. If they have a question about whether or not seeing an intimacy coach for, again, the tools, tricks, or tips, then that's what I have that I can refer as a service. But you can also go to my website. If you're not on social media, it's everythingssexy.net. And there you can see the podcast that we've done and some other ones. And then you can also see some of the workshops and things that are offered there. And there are the links there to my books. The third book is only available in audio format in my book club. And what people get to do in the book club is also get exposed to some of the other basic information where they can learn about not just the body, but being able to be intimate and having some general communication before we have kind of our virtual, it's almost like being in class, before we have our virtual connections, and they'll have, opportunities to ask questions and access me, and then we're going to take it on the boats.
Yes,
So
we
in
are.
May, we're going to have the book club in on the water.
Yes, I'm so looking forward to everything that you got going on, especially this workshop that we have coming up. More details will be shared on both our websites.
I can bring some toys.
We're going to have plenty of things. We're going to
Okay.
have plenty of things
So
to
you gonna keep them
touch
calm.
and see.
They gonna
and
meditate. They
yes.
gonna learn some internal ways of
Yeah,
getting
just
to
that
their-
whole balance and just get that body, that practice that breath work that we all need to be able to experience all these different ways of tapping into this pleasure.
Yeah, because you can have an orgasm without touching yourself. Just with breath work.
Well, you heard it from the expert. Come learn at Sentiment Sessions workshop that we're having with featuring Dr. Joy on how to have an orgasm just by breathing. And she's about to teach me this right now after this show. Okay. Thank you so much for being on the show. Looking forward to this workshop with you and much more to come in the future. All righty? Don't be
being
surprised
here.
if I bring you back for another podcast too. So look for more. And I just want to thank you all for joining this particular podcast. I know it's a lot to unpack. It's a whole nother world here. But hey, worth exploring. Thank you all for joining. Until next time, have a good one.